FERC or Commission, I'd like to welcome you here tonight to our public scoping meeting to take environmental comments on the Northeast Energy Direct NED or NED project proposed by Tennessee Gas Pipeline Company, TGP. It's often referred to as Kinder Morgan because Tennessee Gas is a subsidiary of Kinder Morgan Corporation. And this project is proposed in FERC docket number PF 1422. My name is Paul Friedman, and I am a staff member at FERC based in Washington, D.C., and I'm working on the environmental team for the NED project. Our goal is eventually to produce an environmental impact statement. We'll talk more about that later. Let me introduce our other team members who are present here tonight. This is Lavinia DeSalto. Over on the sign-up table is Jennifer Ferris and Wayne Kicklighter. They all work for a company called Cardno. Cardno is our environmental contractor for this project, and they're going to assist FERC staff in writing the environmental impact statement, or EIS. Let the record show that this meeting began at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, July 15, 2015, at the VFW building in Great Bend, Pennsylvania. You may have noticed over here I have Larry. He's a court reporter. He's transcribing this meeting. This is so we can have an accurate record of tonight's comments. Eventually, an electronic copy of the transcript of this meeting will be placed into the FERC's e-library system, which contains the public record for this proceeding. The FERC has a transcription contract with ACE Federal Reporters, that's who Larry works for, and if you wish to obtain a copy of the transcript prior to its placement in the FERC public files, you must make arrangements directly with ACE, which means you have to talk to Larry when this meeting is over. I'll tell you what to do to get an early copy of the transcript. The FERC is the lead federal agency for both the authorization of this project under the Natural Gas Act and for compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, of power lines or siting of oil pipelines. So no, the FERC is not involved in the so-called Keystone XL pipeline. The FERC does not regulate the exploration, production, or gathering of natural gas. Those activities are regulated by the states. Therefore, any comments about hydraulic fracturing or fracking, which is a method of exploration and production, would be out of scope for our EIS because those are activities that the FERC does not regulate. We're only going to do an EIS about activities we have control over. Our agency is directed by 5 commissioners who are appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by Congress. The FERC staff, like me, are civil servants. We, the FERC staff, do not make decisions. The 5 people who sit on the 11th floor of my building, they are the decision makers. But staff does make recommendations to the commissioners, and you will be able to read our environmental recommendations at the end chapter of the EIS. So our recommendations are not a secret. On June 30th, 2015, the FERC issued a notice of intent to produce an EIS for the NED project. That NOI announced these public scoping meetings. The NOI also explained how to file written comments with the Commission. The FERC prefers the electronic filing of comments using our e-comment feature. Go to the FERC's internet website at www.ferc.gov and click on Documents and Filings. Or you can send your comments in the old-fashioned way by writing a letter and mailing it to the Secretary of the Commission at 888 First Street Northeast, Washington, D.C. 20426. In all cases, put the docket number, which is PF 14-22, on your correspondence. Tonight I'd like to accomplish a couple of things. 1, I want to summarize the project very, very briefly. 2, I want to explain the role of the FERC in the review of the project. 3, I want to outline how the public may participate in our environmental review process. And lastly, I'd like to allow the public an opportunity to voice your concerns about the project at this forum. I ask that you reserve all questions until after my presentation. There is a table in the back of this room and through this door where Wayne is standing, where you can still sign up to be a speaker tonight if you haven't already done so. Let me emphasize that this is not a hearing on the merits of the proposal. No decisions would be made based on this meeting. As I said earlier, this meeting provides you, the public, an opportunity to comment on the types of environmental issues that you would like to see covered in our EIS. The more specific your comments are about potential environmental impacts, the more useful it will be for the FERC staff to focus our attention on important issues. Statements for or against the project are not particularly useful and will not influence the analysis in the EIS. There are some ground rules about decorum during this meeting. First, treat all speakers with respect, whether you agree with them or not. 2, no booing, cheering, applauding, or yelling out. 3, if the audience becomes unruly, which I do not think will happen tonight, I do reserve the right to close the meetings. I have been at meetings where they have been very contentious, and I have had to threaten to close them if the crowd would not allow speakers to speak. We will take speakers up until the time that all speakers who have signed up have had their opportunity to speak. Or, if we had a lot of speakers, which I don't think we have tonight, we would continue until the venue has a closing time. Each speaker will be limited to not more than 5 minutes, and as a matter of fairness, I will strictly enforce the 5-minute time rule using this stoplight. At 4.5 minutes, it turns yellow, and at 5 it turns red, and at that time we'd like you to yield the floor to the next speaker. All comments will be considered, whether written or verbal. The FERC gives equal consideration to both written and verbal comments. I would like to clarify that the FERC did not conceive of this project, nor are we promoting it. The project was designed by Tennessee Gas Pipeline, which, as I said before, is a subsidiary of Kinder Morgan, and we call them either the company or the applicant. The company came up with the location of their facilities, and it is up to the FERC staff to analyze the environmental impacts associated with the construction and operation of those facilities. The FERC is not an advocate for the project. FERC staff are advocates for the environmental review process. So let me go over some of the project background. On October 2nd, 2014, the FERC accepted Tennessee Gas's request to initiate our pre-filing environmental review process for the NED project. During pre-filing, the burden is on the company to communicate with stakeholders and identify issues of concern, and to attempt to resolve those issues and to perfect its formal application to the FERC. Tennessee Gas has not yet filed an application with the FERC. They have stated, however, they'd like to do so in about October of this year. The purpose of the NED project is to provide about 2 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas to markets in the Northeast. The proposed facilities would consist of, and here I'm generalizing, 412 miles of pipeline across portions of Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. 9 associated laterals or loops totaling 60 additional miles, and 9 compressor stations, 14 new meter stations, and 1 modified existing compressor station. You can read much more details about the project in Resource Report 1, which is the project description, already filed by Tennessee Gas in the FERC e-library system. And again, there are instructions for how to use e-library in the notice of intent, which you can get on the table over there. During pre-filing, Tennessee Gas will file a number of draft resource reports as outlined in our regulations at 18 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 380, so that FERC can review those in advance of an application. The public may also comment on Tennessee Gas's draft environmental resource reports. Right now, in the process, we are in the scoping period. The formal comment period will not end until August 31st, 2015. However, FERC staff will continue to consider comments filed up until the time we write the EIS. Based on comments received to date and our review of the draft resource reports, we have identified the following environmental issues. The public is concerned about impacts on land use, including rural characteristics and conservation lands. The public is concerned about impacts on towns and residential areas. The public is concerned about impacts on groundwater, including aquifers and wells. The public is concerned about impacts on air quality and noise from compressor stations. This is in no way a comprehensive list. It's just a brief summary of what we've seen so far filed in the docket from public comments. After the application is filed, there are other opportunities for the public to enter into the process and make comments. These opportunities for comments include in response to our notice of application and in response to the notice of the issuance of our draft environmental impact statement. After a company has filed its formal application and the FERC has noticed that application, parties may request intervenor status. Being an intervenor is a legal position. Intervenors can request rehearing on a commission decision. They also have the burden of serving all parties. You do not have to be an intervenor to have your environmental comments considered. However, you cannot intervene during the pre-filing process. You must wait until Tennessee Gas files its formal application. After the application is filed, the FERC staff will identify data gaps and write an environmental information request. Once the FERC staff is convinced that the application is complete so that we fully understand the potential impacts the project may have on the environment, we will issue a notice of schedule for our EIS. Based on the application and our own research, the FERC staff will produce an EIS in accordance with the regulations written by the Council of Environmental Quality, or CEQ, at Title 40, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 1500 to 1508, to satisfy the requirements of the NEPA. That document will offer our independent analysis of the potential environmental impacts of the proposals and alternatives. Generally, the EIS will discuss the current environment, identify potential project-related impacts on specific resources, and present proposed measures to avoid, reduce, or mitigate adverse effects. The FERC will address such research topics as geology and soils, water and wetlands, vegetation and wildlife, cultural resources, socioeconomics, land use, air quality and noise, and safety. We'll also evaluate reasonable and feasible alternatives. The next thing in the process would be for the FERC staff to produce a draft EIS that would be circulated for public comment. Copies of the DEIS would be sent to our environmental mailing list, which includes elected officials, government agencies, environmental groups, and non-governmental organizations, Indian tribes, local libraries, and newspapers. We addressed comments on the draft in a final EIS. The EIS is not a decision document. The commissioners will consider the environmental impacts disclosed in the EIS together with other non-environmental issues such as markets and rates. The commissioners develop a certificate policy statement that establishes the criteria they use for determining whether or not a project is in the public need and has a public benefit. The commission decision will be issued as a project order. If the commission decides to authorize the project, they will give Tennessee Gas a certificate of public convenience and necessity. If the commission decides to authorize the project, the FERC staff will make certain that the environmental conditions appended to the order are satisfied. Those conditions usually include a stipulation that the company obtain all other necessary federal permits, like under the Clean Water Act or the Endangered Species Act, and authorizations prior to construction. The company must implement all of the measures they committed to in their application and mitigation programs. FERC staff and our environmental contractors will monitor the project through construction, restoration, and the completion of mitigation programs. We will perform on-site inspections to make certain that the project is in compliance with the environmental conditions of the order. Now I'm done with the summary of the FERC process, and now is the time for us to take public comments. I will call up speakers individually in the order in which they have signed up by number. We don't have a microphone, we're going to have everyone asked to go to the podium. You have to speak loudly using your big person voice because we don't have a microphone. Clearly state your name.
Can I ask why you don't have a microphone for a meeting? Isn't that like a requirement?
They don't have one of us.
It has to do with the venue. When you get to the podium, please tell us your name and spell it out for the court reporter. If you represent an organization, tell us the name of your organization without using an acronym. If you are a landowner along the pipeline route, please indicate where your property is located according to mile marks or cross streets.
You know that?
The first speaker is number 1.
Earlier you spoke that you had nothing to do with the pipeline route.
That's correct. Who picks the pipeline route?
Well, it doesn't matter. It's upon your approval that they steal our land. So actually, you have a great deal to do with
But
the
we
pipeline route.
don't select the pipeline route. The pipeline route is selected by the company.
But you allow them to steal the
We don't
pipeline
allow
route.
anything until there's an authorization. There's probably
We've
not
already
been
been through this. You're the second pipeline going through our property. We've already been through this once before.
Okay.
They've already stolen our land.
Okay, well,
And it was your approval that made it possible.
that's correct.
So the idea that you have nothing to do with the pipeline
We
route
don't
is
select the
ludicrous.
pipeline. It's not ludicrous. It's a fact. You don't select the pipeline route. What my project team does is evaluate the impacts that route will have on the environment. I don't make a
Not the
decision.
people, just the environment.
The environment includes people. We have a socioeconomic section in the EIS that absolutely addresses impacts on people. We talk about things like impacts on property values, impacts on landowners. Absolutely, that's in the EIS.
No, that's not true. The impact on landowners is not even considered.
It will be considered in this EIS.
And the last one,
Well, I didn't.
and I'm sorry, you're a federal agency, I would assume. that
Every
you're going to be-
EIS I've ever written in 25 years at the FERC has addressed landowner issues. Every
Really?
single one.
Well, they never talked to us. We
Well,
weren't even contacted.
That's why we have public meetings, so you can tell us your concerns.
We did the first time, it didn't help. This is my point, the FERC never contacted us. And to say that you consider,
Did you get a copy of the NOI for this in the mail?
well, of course we did.
Then we did contact you.
And it, oh, God, okay. No, you're right, no, you're absolutely right, I'm sorry.
Yes,
I have 2 quick questions.
Okay.
You mentioned public convenience and necessity.
that's the end document that the commissioners will issue if they authorize the project.
Is that the same thing as eminent domain?
It is not. Eminent, it gives, let me explain this. Congress in 1947 amended the Natural Gas Act. And what it said is, if FERC gives a certificate of public convenience and necessity, then the pipeline company that receives it does get the right of eminent domain. So you're partially correct.
Okay. And someone like Norman Bay, do you ever speak to him personally?
I have spoken to him once in the elevator.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the public, where they're concerned with the public. We spoke to them in an elevator.
Yes. So, speaker number 1's already at the podium.
I'd just like to ask a question also.
Yes.
I'd like to know, how are you a federal agency? Are you really a federal agency?
We are authorized by Congress under the Natural Gas Act. We were created by Congress.
And then who funds you?
We are funded by Congress. There's a line item in the budget.
And are you funded by anybody else besides Congress?
Nope.
And what,
There's a misconception going around that we are funded by industry. It's absolutely not correct. We are funded by Congress. If Congress decides they want to do away with us, they can write us out of the budget, and we won't exist as an agency. However, we also charge fees to the companies we regulate. Those fees do not go to the commission. Those fees go directly into the U.S. Treasury.
and have you ever denied a pipeline?
Yes, but very few.
Can you mention one?
Not off the top of my head. Very few.
And-
Here's what I will say, though. We get lots of applications, thousands of applications. Not every application goes from the starting phase to the ending phase where a decision is made. A lot of them die along the way. We give certificates to companies, and the facilities don't get built because the markets have changed. So not everything we authorize gets built, and not every application goes to a certificate. Yes?
They mentioned they're going to have like, one new compressor station and one modified.
There's going to be several compressor stations.
How many?
I think 9, is that right?
I thought you said one.
No.
9.
Number I think was 9.
Try 9.
Okay, I misheard, they say it's 9.
9.
Yeah, okay, that's for record. Yeah.
And do they have dehydration at these stations, or is
I
just...
don't know. You can, but that's a good question to put into a comment for us. We'll look it up. All right, so now we'll get the first speaker done. So remember to state your name so the court reporter can spell it.
Okay, my name is Brett Jennings, counselor for Great Bend Borough and chairman of the Halsted Great Bend Joint Sewer Authority. There's some issues when you go underneath rivers or interstate highways. Just right up above here, just north of the borough. They drilled underneath the river. People's private water wells were being affected. That was also going into the sewer system from their well down their drain. And if that affects any sewer system along the route, they could start going after the companies that are going and boring underneath if it affects the treatment process. And I believe that's covered in the 2002 bioterrorism. Gas going through that pipeline is coming from the Marcellus region. There's USGS Open File Report Services 2012-1159 that deals with that, with how high the radon content is, for how many picocuries per cubic liter. It'll increase it above 4, which is what EPA says is the standard. There's also Open File Report 81-778, which is geochemistry of trace elements, uranium and Devonian shales of the Appalachian Basin. I'll back up why you're getting the radon. This is the Chesapeake Bay area. We have a MS4 permit, or a municipal separate storm sewer system permit in this borough. I have a permit that's awaiting on 2.5 years since it should have been issued, a permit for discharge at the sewer plant, because Pennsylvania has not been meeting its goals in 2014 and 2015. New York State still has issues. And one of the things is they don't have what can happen from development of the shale area, which is the induced development caused by a pipeline. How much will that affect our total nitrogen, total phosphorus? How much will it raise it? How much best management practices will the companies use to delete that? Will they be on record to having to maintain those reductions if they do it off-site at a different location? Those are very big things, because I would hate to see my sewer plant get sucked down to half our permit limits now, or to the limits of technology, because people can't stop increasing our development, even though there was supposed to be an EIS to solve that. Also, the zip code on page 3 for Great Bend, there might be people running around in Towanda that was incorrect. Correct zip code is 18821. As for on page 2, the right of eminent domain, there's no right by any federal government level. It's a power authorized by the right people to create that company or corporation or government. And when you start sending stuff overseas or sending it to Canada, it starts bringing up issues. Can they even issue eminent domain? But that's for a jury of the person's peers when they call court against the government or the person who explicitly gave that power away, or gave that power to a company to exercise. And then for air quality, 28 August 2012. This was for the Constitution pipeline, but it's relevant. Or no, this was on the laser pipeline. This was hearings for air quality by the DEP. that same night, there was hearings at the Susquehanna County Planning Commission to increase the size of that facility. Although it wasn't reflected in the DEP hearing on the same night, less than 2 miles away from each other. And with some of these areas, you're gonna have rattlesnakes. Harmony Township area, where it follows the Bluestone. There's areas where there's rattlesnakes. Area where it doesn't follow the Constitution pipeline and it's rattled, which is where I have property on, back a hunting stand that's 30 feet from the markers where the Constitution is going in.
So, Mr. Jenks, can you now wrap up?
That is, there's bats and rattlesnake surveys. That area of Harmony Township is full of rattlesnakes. The entire township. The township doesn't maintain paved roads and has wood plank bridges.
Thank you for your comments. One thing I want to make clear to everybody is when you raise issues, whether it's about rattlesnakes or water quality or property rights, we will address those comments in the EIS. So that's why we hold these meetings. We want to hear the comments. We want to know the issue that you're saying. Thank you for your comments.
I just have a quick question.
No, wait till we're through.
I
all
can't
our-
find the width of the pipeline. Why is that not listed in these papers? What
Because
is the
it's-
size of the
It's
pipeline?
in Resource Report 1.
Is it in here?
Is it in where?
Is it in the papers that you gave us at the desk?
I don't think it is.
So can you tell us what it is?
I actually don't know what it is.
30-inch pipeline, is that what you, it's a 30-inch?
It's a 30-inch?
30 or 30.
Actually, according to the paperwork we received, it's 42.
I know, I think it changes along the route.
I think it does change along the route.
What
That's
goes
why.
to our property is 42.
30 to 42 then. Thank you.
All right, speaker number 2.
I think the paperwork should ask, I think that was what, March that was filed?
Which, the Resource Report 1?
Right.
I don't remember.
My name is Helen Wasnowick, W-A-S-N-O-W-I-C. And pipeline will go through my property. I am mainly concerned about the deforestation of my property, which is, they're actually going to take 560 some feet, linear feet. That doesn't include this, you know, whatever 100 feet wide it's going to be, that they're going to cut the trees down. In the township of New Milford, that is just under approximately 22,000 feet, which is just a little under 4 miles, they are going to deforest. That's not the whole thing. That is just where they are taking trees down. That's 4 miles, 4 linear miles of trees they will be taking down. Along with that, I currently have a lot of natural springs in the area where they want to come through with the pipeline. Right now, these natural springs go down into a wetland that is across from my property, on the other side of the street. There's a huge sluice pipe that goes under the road, takes all that water across to the wetlands. What will happen to these natural springs when they put the pipeline in? And what will happen if that water no longer goes over to the wetlands across the road? Those are my main questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Speaker number 3.
My name is Catherine Holland, that's Catherine with a C, Hollera. We have a little over 22 acre parcel outside of New Milford. It's a lakefront property, and we've got 200 feet on a private spring-fed lake. We already have Constitution pipeline cutting through. I'm bringing this up because Northeast Energy Direct Project is running completely parallel, I think, on most of its route to the Constitution.
Well, part of it's correct.
It is on ours. We're already being cut through by Constitution. I've seen the maps, and it's on the east side of the Constitution line directly through our property. So our property is 22 some acres. I see they're taking 6,761 acres to do the Northeast project. And so our little 22 acre parcel, we're losing almost a quarter of it already to Constitution. taking a little over 5 acres of our 22-acre parcel. They are cutting through on a 30-inch pipeline, 190 feet quarterly long. It's all our woods in the back of our property. We have a maple syrup business. We tap those maple trees. We were tapping those maple trees. They're going to come through. They've already taken, we wouldn't sign. We told them we have a lake property. There's wetlands there. There's a natural fed, spring-fed inlet that goes into the lake, which is one of the 3 major inlets on the lake. It's cutting right through it. It's either going under it. I'm not sure how they're doing it. I guess they're going under it. So this is all right on our lakefront property. All through our fields. We have 3 fields. We have 3 early American natural-built stone walls from way back when on our property are going through. It's directly behind the homestead on our property where my sister and her husband live. And it's close to the well, the drilled well, which is their sole source of their water supply. It's a little bit up the hill. At the top of the hill, there's a stone port, which is the next neighboring property to our west. That's our neighbor, and he was okay with it. He only has his property for profit for the stone quarry, which, okay, there's a stone quarry, I understand that part. But if you look at the topo maps, you'll see that on the other side of the stone quarry, there's just open, it's woods, and I know it's still more deforestation, but it's up on the top of the mountain and no one lives there, it's uninhabited. It's not cutting through lake property. It's not cutting right next to our well. It's not taking out all of our forests and all of our trees and all of our maples that we make part of our living off of with our maple syrup business. It's not cutting through stone walls. It's not taking on our fields. But did they consider that? No. And we brought it up many times. I have no idea why they did not want to go with that alternative. So now we've got Constitution who took us by eminent domain because we never would sign. We're one of 7 landowners that refuse. We still refuse. I'm still in litigation with them. And they already called us eminent domain. And now Northeast Direct wants to come right beside it and come closer to our house, take the remainder of whatever trees might still be left. And I don't understand out of 6,700 acres why my 22-acre parcel has to be cut completely through. It makes a netted return when it goes through our acreage. So I think it has environmental impact on the part that's the lake property, that's the stream that goes in, all of our early American stone walls. It's the character and land use of our land. It's a recreational property. And we have our cottage, we have cottages down there. We have our whole lakefront area. So the disruption of rural character and land use, that's a major part of my problem. Also the fact that we use our woods, not only for the aesthetic value and the fact that they are behind our house on that side of the mountain, like another person here has commented on deforestation of your land and the aesthetic value and the character of the land. And it's taking out most of all the woods already. So now they want to come through with a second pipeline to take the rest. Our answer will be the same. No, we won't sign. So I can't understand why we can't get this alternative of somebody to move it to the west of us. I know it's too late because you're already.
It's not too late, we're in pre-filing, let me address that exact issue.
Right.
Have you filed a letter with the FERC
Yes.
suggesting this alternative?
Yes.
And you've drawn on a map?
I didn't draw that. I didn't draw that, but I did.
That would be useful for us to analyze the environmental impacts of the alternative.
My problem, I
If we
think-
had the alternative route drawn on a USGS quad, so we can analyze the route that you suggest.
But if here's Constitution, and then here's Northeast Direct, and Constitution did not move, so how are you going to?
I cannot answer that question. I would analyze the alternative. I don't know what the outcome would be. But how can I analyze an alternative if I don't know where
Okay.
it is?
And I have filed all these comments. I filed them, e-filed, and I mailed them, and I've already copied them also. But that's my problem. I
So
would
my
love to see
suggestion
you
is
switch your.
a map to go along.
That would be excellent. I did show somebody that when we were at your other meeting at Blue Ridge School. But I don't know how it could be moved now because if Constitution isn't going to move, they haven't cut through our trees yet because they can't, I don't think, till October. But if they can't move, then I don't know how you can do it. But
I don't know the outcome, but we would like to analyze all alternatives we're made aware of.
Yeah, I have all my comments. I just want to make sure that you heard me again. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. A map would be useful.
Okay. Sure you can.
Speaker number 4.
I'm speaking here today not, my name is Barry Corrigan Jr., C-O-R-R-I-G-A-N. And I'm not speaking here on an environmental level, I'm speaking on a strictly property rights, the husband of the woman when she was speaking about. They're running right through our property. And I want to present to you a scenario about what they're doing to us, so that you can understand. Picture that you have a house with a large section of it that you're not using. And a company comes to you and says, we would like to build a child care center in your house. And what we're going to do is we're going to pay you for the rugs and the drapes, and the electrical, and the flooring, and the furniture. And then we're going to use it forever and never give you another dime. Your answer is going to be, no, I won't do that. So what they do is they run off to the government and get them to bring police in and steal your property. Now you have a room full of screaming children. And oh, by the way, if you have children, you can't use that facility because it's not like we're going to have access to the gas. You act like it's an eminent public welfare. It's not. I'm one of the public. I have no access to this gas. Oh, and by the way, I get to pay insurance and taxes on that property while you make a profit the entire time. Not you, FERC, but the company that's running it through. $720,000 a day is how much money they're going to lose if we hold them up for one day. Well, if you're making $720,000 a day, and for the entire destruction of our property, for the rest of the life of the property, you're offering us the price of a medium pickup truck that we have to divide among 5 people. This is not business. If you're going to use the property for an extended period of time while making money, the family and the property owners have to be reasonably compensated on a regular basis, not a one-time, oh, well, we paid for that tree. We paid for that ground once. 20 years from now, they're making $720,000 a day. And the families of the people that own the property get nothing. There's no other business in the world that you can have an access of resources for free forever. And this is what they're doing. And you're facilitating it by allowing them to steal our land. They came to us with a business proposition and we said no. And you have decided that they should be right. It is wrong, it is immoral, and it is anti-American business. The families have to be compensated on a continual level, especially if they said no, because you're forcing it on them. If somebody says, yep, good idea, I'll go along with it, well, they're idiots and that's okay. But when a family says no, and you force them to do it, and you still do not grant them access to what's going through their land, that's pure thievery. And it's thievery on a continual basis. It's not even a one-time thing. It's a continuous thievery of their property and their assets. I'm done.
Thank you for your comment. I do want to clarify one thing. The commission has not made a decision about this project.
You did with Constitution.
That's
We've
okay.
already not had our pants pulled down.
That's a different project. I'm only here to discuss the Tennessee Gas project.
Well, you're right. And I'm sorry, we shall not take your earlier screw-ups into account.
All right, speaker number 5.
I'm Tony Baroni, R. Anthony, before him. I'm a landowner on Sutton Road in Milford. I got a letter from Tennessee, and then it says, to minimize the impacts from construction, the proposed pipeline facilities will be co-located for a majority of the length with the existing utility corridor. Well, that's a false statement. I hope you people realize it. Because what they're doing, they're not minimizing it, they're just taking the impacts they already made and making them worse. Now, I have dealt with Constitution, and I've come to a conclusion that it's great to have a FERC project. The landman will come and tell us, this is a federal project, so everything's gonna be done right to the button, everything's gonna be done right, we're gonna get everything squared away, it's perfect, because the feds are gonna be on it, FERC is on it. Well, I know that doesn't work, doesn't play that way. I saw the document with the Constitution. The impact statement, I've only got 600 some feet they're going across. FERC buys a right of way, and what's in the impact statement shows it in a different area. Nobody comes and checks. I don't see FERC people out there. I see surveyors that are working for the companies. I wish that you people would take the citizens into account as much as you do the wetlands and the bats. We are part of the environment also. And I think I'm echoing what some others say, that they don't seem to consider us. Bluestone came through my property. I'm a gas-friendly person. I sold them the right away, they came through. But they weren't a federal project. So they bought options. They bought options to buy a path. And when those options didn't link up, they bought an option from me that we couldn't make the connections. Some of the people didn't want to link up with us. So we'd rather go through in a different direction. And that's what they did. That is what you should be making these people do. We're in a gas-friendly county here. They don't have to follow the same route that the last guy went through. You see what's happening to us, one after another, you know, 3 pipelines coming through your property, pretty soon, well, how many more are gonna come along? So they're actually making it worse. They're not negating impact. And I hope you take that into consideration. And I hope you take this into consideration. When it's a federal project, they come down and say, aha, this is a federal project. So, you better sign up with us or we're gonna take your land anyway. They come in heavy-handed. Constitution did. Tennessee doesn't seem, from the first couple letters I got from them, to be quite as heavy-handed as them. But I think you should understand that they use that as leverage. Because all we've got to do is draw a line and then make a big, complicated impact statement, EIS, that who's going to read when it's 3,700 pages long or whatever it is. I doubt if you'll read the whole thing, even though everything comes across your desk. It probably gets pretty boring. But it has errors. And that's why I think you should make them go through the way they do, as if it's not a federal project. Because once it's federal, they just draw the straightest line as they can, the easiest line across the map, and then say, well, we'll tweak it here, there, whatever we can do to accommodate FERC. And I've talked to the surveyors, when I said, why are you going here where we got a wetland? You could go over there, up on the hill, where there's no wetland. The surveyor gets a blank look on his face like, it's too late now, we're too far downstream, FERC won't let us change at this point, and they go. So, that's my comment.
Thank you for your comment. Again, I'm going to say it, it's not too late. We're in pre-filing. No decision's been made about the project. We have not written one word of the EIS. We're listening to your comments. If you have an alternative route, if you'll inform us about that route, including a little map with a line drawn on it, we would analyze that. I can't guarantee what the outcome will be,
I can.
but
Well, my-
but I can tell you
the
that we
point I-
can analyze it.
The point I tried to make was, they should come up with the alternative routes. I mean, if they did it the way, if it was not an interstate pipeline, the way Bluestone, DTE Bluestone did, because that wasn't interstate, they couldn't get eminent domain. They had to work with the landowners. They went through the people who were willing to sell the right of way. And for sure, there's gotta be ways through Susquehanna County where you can minimize the number of people that are aggravating. Because I think overall, you'll find this very gas-friendly county. You know,
Thank you.
I am, but
All right,
they get worn down after a few of them.
we're at speaker number 6.
Do we give names or no?
Yes,
Vera Scroggins from Citizens for Clean Water.
and please spell your name for the court reporter.
The whole thing?
Yeah?
V like in Victor, E-R-A, S-C-R-O-G-G-I-N-S.
Thank you.
And I'm from Susquehanna County. And like some of the previous speakers have said, get ready for your next pipeline. We have 2 on this family's property, number 3 for, sounds like for the Barones. So get ready for number 3, number 4, because it's just gonna keep going. And I consider that absolutely outrage, that we have to endure this, and for what? So I want to say that FERC, I don't consider FERC really working in our interest. I don't consider FERC actually deciding in our interest, but basically working for the industry. You're going to be cutting through 87 streams and rivers, 53 wetlands, 33 public parks, 33 lands protected by conservation easements. And you'll have people, thousands of people that will be impacted, and in a potential blast zone. If there is a leak, gas leak, and if there is an explosion, we're talking about all kinds of people that are in that blast zone. It's a dangerous thing to be next to high pressure, 30 inches to 36-inch pipelines. This is not like suburbia. I'm from suburbia. 25 years ago, we did not have such pipelines in our roads, in front of our homes like they have now. And there's no minimum setback as far as I have found. That means they can put it within 50 feet of homes. They have it on school properties. They can be next to schools, they can be next to anything, farms where we grow our food. Consider that also unacceptable and outrage to the American public. And of course, property values are going to be reduced. In this particular write-up, it says 20 to 30%, but I consider more than that, because if I was going to buy property that had 3 pipelines, high pressure, large size pipelines on their property, I wouldn't consider buying that property, unless they were basically giving it away. So we have that situation. I'd like to be an intervener. At some point, I've intervened on several pipelines, and as far as I can see, they all get approved, but we could delay it as much as possible. We need to delay these pipelines so it costs them millions every single day. And then they possibly may not build it. And then you have to see if it's really necessary to have this pipeline. The demand is not there. The need is not there for this gas. And you're going through, looks like at least 5 states, 412 miles, 9 compressor stations. Absolute outrage. They are going to emit toxic emissions. And like I even asked you, you don't even know if there's dehydration at these compressor stations. We have enough compressor stations already in our county. These are 9 along, of course, the whole route. We're going to get at least 1 that I know of in the New Milford area where we have 12 stations, 12 compressor stations in 12 compressors on 1 station, which to me it's like even hard to fathom that they would even do such a thing, and it's near homes, and they're emitting every day, plus the noise every day besides the toxic emissions, and the potential for risk and explosion. So that's what you're going to add, and of course you're going to approve this, unless of course we can show there's no need for it. Or if they decide to opt out of it, they don't have enough money and investors, which that might happen. Because right now, gas prices are down, they've plummeted, oil prices have plummeted, so this whole project may be withdrawn. Anybody in their sane mind who's an investor should not invest in something like this. And as far as this being a gas-friendly, I would have to disagree with Mr. Baroni, it's increasingly becoming less of a gas-friendly county. After we see all the things that we're going through that we have to be subjected to, including what he's being subjected to, and there'll be more down the road, so it'll be less and less gas-friendly. And I would like to say that these pipelines are large, 30 to 36 inches. And as far as environmental, you can have thousands of pages. What does it mean? Does it mean much of anything? Because I can see if it's in the public convenience and you think there's a demand, you will approve this. No matter what we say here, I've been to a whole group of these hearings. They all have gotten approved at this point, unless the company themselves opts out. So it's basically a joke. It's basically a sham. You're here to present as if you're going to help us and take care of us. And it's just a nice little series of events for us to go through and to present our material.
Thank you for your comments.
And is it 5 minutes yet?
Yep.
Thank you.
Speaker number 7, please.
Hello, my name is Alex Lotorto, L-O-T-O-R-T-O. Speaking first in my capacity as a landscape contractor and also as an environmentalist. My organization that I work with is Energy Justice Network. Our organization is specifically right now counseling a number of landowners in the number of 75 to 100 along the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline right-of-way in Susquehanna, Wyoming, and Luzerne County. I spoke at a similar hearing like this time last year around Atlantic Sunrise, and I'll repeat some of the things I want to note. One is landowner rights. There was a decision in the federal Supreme Court, it was called Kelo. It was a decision about a pharmaceutical company in Connecticut that received eminent domain power because of an economically distressed neighborhood. Pennsylvania, in response, passed very strict laws about the use of eminent domain in our Commonwealth to protect landowners from eminent domain for use by private companies for private profit and not in a utility capacity. And we have those laws in place today, and they've been most recently reviewed in this county by, there was a project called the Laser Pipeline, which is now owned by Williams, that was subjected to the Public Utility Commission and their permitting process. And they withdrew that permit because we don't know exactly why, but in the opinions of the dissenting commissioners on the PUC, that this did not, a gathering line system in Susquehanna County did not meet the utility status and was not a public convenience and necessity according to Pennsylvania's laws. So after that round of permitting in 2011 and 12, you see a lot more FERC applications coming from these companies, and it's a pattern. They don't want to go through gathering line permitting through the PUC. They don't feel that they can get enough landowners in a line to agree to their easement offers that are pathetic, according to those landowners. And they're not willing to fairly negotiate for the fair value of those properties. We need to consider costs to the landowners, including their own appraisals that have to be brought in your economic review. Appraisals for rural properties that include forestry, agricultural uses, quarry rights, mineral rights, alternative uses to those properties, subdivisions, all have to be done by special rural property appraisers in Pennsylvania that are licensed professionally, and most of them are out of Clark Summit. And most of those appraisers work for the gas companies on these projects, also the electric utilities. So it's very hard to find someone without a conflict of interest, and these landowners work very hard to do that. And I think it's not fair, obviously, to these landowners to have to go up against a mammoth agency and a mammoth company to make the case that their property is worth more than the company's appraisal. And that has to be considered in your economic analysis. We also have environmental rights in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Constitution has the right to clean air, pure water, and the rural, scenic, and aesthetic values of the environment. It's in our Pennsylvania Constitution, and it's the job of our agencies, not the federal agencies, but our agencies to protect those rights. And I've not lobbied very hard, with our landowners and our group to change how FERC is allowed to put these things into place. I think that it's a violation of our rights. Recently, just some more environmental issues. The northern Myotis bat is a long-eared bat, recently listed on the endangered species list. They found 44 of those, according to the environmental impact statement, for the Constitution pipeline. Those at the time were not federally listed, now they are. And you need to consider that. You're not supposed to cut a tree, if any landowner is not supposed to cut a tree within 10 miles of where the Hibernacular, which is where they sleep in the wintertime. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in New York has been very grateful, Tim Sullivan, who's a biologist there, to limit the tree cutting period to February and March to protect bats. And the companies are pushing very hard to keep cutting in the off season and things like that. That needs to be considered. Also, this pipeline starts in the 300 line of the Tennessee pipeline, which is part of a recent DC Circuit Court of Appeals decision that Delaware Riverkeeper Network had filed in relation to the Northeast Upgrade Project and their 300 line upgrade in 2011 and 2013, which I was very involved in monitoring. And we found $4 million worth of fines, violations and fines from Delaware Riverkeeper Network in wetlands with wood chip piles 3 feet high around the base of rare species of trees. And when they did their replanting, they put yellow and red pines at high elevation that were native to the forest. They put conifers in wooded areas and deciduous areas. And I felt very, as a landscape contractor, very just offended by the lack of respect. That was in the Delaware State Forest, and I haven't even gone on to all the private properties to take a look. But those violations alone in the Delaware State Forest, in Pinchot Brook Wetland, which was a core habitat for endangered species, were permitted by FERC to happen. And now you have Phragmites, you have, which is an invasive species, you have multiflora rose, you have barberry, and you have, what else did we find? Knotweed, Japanese knotweed, in the right-of-way. That's being very poorly maintained. And all these landowners have to do that themselves because it's after 2 years, they're released from really significant maintenance of invasives. The soil was so compacted in the right-of-way, it was more compacted than an earthen dam in Pike County. And that means that the runoff from that into the wetlands is disrupting, our sensitive wetlands. And I can't dig in a wetland, you can't dig in a wetland if you're a private landowner, but these pipelines can dig through, whatever they'd like to do with your permission. And finally, as a union member, I wanted to say I've noticed among one of their contractors is Michael Pipeline Construction. There's a common contractor for Kinder Morgan. Frequent OSHA violations. You're not allowed to drop a tree within the two lengths of that tree's radius, and if someone's not wearing protective gear. When I was monitoring, trees were dropping all around me. We had guys kick-starting their chainsaw instead of setting it down. They were sent onto the job in the middle of February with sleet on 80-degree grade slopes, and they were falling with chainsaws with no blade covers on. You have to look at the compliance history of all their contractors and all their history in this state. And I'd like, FERC to take a look in the last few years of their compliance history with other agencies. And the last thing I want to say is, it's a more moderate complaint, but PPL has announced plans to put a high voltage power line from Towanda with that new Moxie Wakanda energy plant through what looks like the co-location with the Tennessee pipeline. It's going to cross Susquehanna County in the southern, and Bradford County in the southern part. There's a best practice in the industry that the EPA Natural Gas Star program recommends, which is to run compressors with electric motors, which reduces the exhaust by 100% because there's no exhaust. The only emissions then are blowdowns and vented tanks, which can also be reduced. And I don't see any reason now that regulations are being adapted from that Natural Gas Star program that the FERC can't require those best practices. So I encourage you to...
Can you wrap up?
I encourage you to look at all the best practices recommended by EPA and require them on all your dockets that you're looking at now, because there's soon going to be regulations and they may have to retrofit them anyway. So
Thank you for your comments. That's the last of people who have signed the sheet. However, this is an open forum, so if anyone else would like to speak, please, all you have to do is raise your hand. No one's raising their hand? All right, good. That's the last.
Wait a second, this one.
All right.
Ronald Goff from New Milford. I live on Sutton Road. I live within a half a mile of the compressor station that's there now. And the new compressor station, which I believe there's going to be 2 compressors in it, is going to be within a half mile of that. We've talked about air quality. How is the air quality monitored? And can there be real-time air quality monitoring of that? And then a warning, a way to allow the homeowners in the area to know when the air quality is getting at critical levels or whatever, you know, that could be harmful to them?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that the company would have to get a state permit for air quality. But since you've raised it in scoping, we'll address the answer after doing some research in the EIS.
And who is the regulatory committee for? I mean, I understand, does FERC regulate what they do, or who is the actual regulatory commission for?
Yeah, we regulate lots of things. We regulate all the environmental impacts, so we'll have, for a project this size, we'll hire a contractor, because I don't have enough FERC staff, to go out and monitor construction by inspecting construction as it occurs 24/7. Okay, so that's one thing we regulate. We, of course, we regulate rates and we regulate tariffs.
Okay, I'm looking at regulation of compliance of the like the air quality and stuff like that. And of course,
I believe that the air quality is regulated by the state under a delegated permit from the Clean Air Act, but I'm not certain. But since you've raised the issue, we'll do some more research on that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
You say you don't regulate it yourself, you contract it out.
That's correct.
You somehow feel that would be cheaper than in-house work?
Because we're funded by the U.S. Congress, they actually
You're getting the money from somewhere.
I'll tell you the answer to your question. I actually do it. Because we're funded by U.S. Congress, they tell us how many people we can employ. So we can't have more FTEs than Congress gives us. So we have to contract a lot of work.
Oh, so it's a way to inflate the budget, I understand.
We have enough money to pay the contractors.
Yeah, which means you could do it cheaper in-house, but you're inflating the budget by limiting.
Well, what we're doing is we cannot increase staff levels, so we have to find a way of increasing staff levels some other way, and so we use contractors. And
Cost more.
well, typically we ask the companies to pay for that, so that it's not a burden on the taxpayers. Yes, sir.
Yeah, in the air quality came up. I have a question, and probably I have a video here that I couldn't show. Can I show you this after we're closed?
You could, or do we take most of the videos in the library? No, they can't. All right, you can show it to me afterwards.
So it's only 16 seconds long.
All right, you can show it to me afterwards. All right. So on behalf of the FERC, I'd like to thank you all for coming here tonight to help us focus the environmental review process on those issues that are of concern to you. Let the record show that this meeting concluded at 7:34 p.m. And sir, I'll come over and you can show me. Gene, USGS Plus. Gene, you said you know about USGS Plus. Use that.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So, you said you did that. So that USGS Plus.
Because I've been through it before. To stand here and act like this is the first time you've ever done this. Very insulting. I disagree here. Very insulting. I understand, but you're acting like this is the first time you've ever done it.
I don't think I'm acting like that. You and I, we're not going to do this.
No, you're not. Well, you're talking to me. Don't act like this because it's insulting. Because we are not the you are. We're the ones that have been through this. And for you to act like we don't know what we're talking about. Oh, well, we have nothing to do with this. Your whole, yes, your whole presentation.
I disagree.
Well, I know you disagree, but you're acting.
We're not going to.
No, we're not.
But, you know.
I'm just trying to give you some, for the next meeting, don't come in like this, because we're not newbies, we know what we're talking about.
So you want to show me something?